Sure, sure.
I was thinking about as I was coming into the studio, I'm like, I'm an old podcaster with a new show. And
Right.
so I'm a little like, you get a little tickle in the tummy today because I'm finally starting to talk about the stuff that really matters to me.
hmm
Honestly, Josh, because after 5 years of doing the So You're in Sales podcast, which don't get
Yep.
me wrong, it's like what I was telling you, like
Yep.
sales as a discipline isn't something that intrigues me, but as a show topic, it's too big.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense
And
to me. Yep.
because of who we are at Social Good Promotions and the approach that we use where we look beyond profit, right?
hmm
For more purpose for what it is that we're trying to accomplish when we sell plastic, which is ultimately what we do a lot of the time.
hmm
It's really intriguing to me, not only from the research that I did for the book, but when I get a chance to talk to people like you who are employing a similar purpose-led strategy. This is our attempt to make the case for the listeners to like, if you're not doing this yet, then this is going to be our pulpit to try to convince you that this is what you should be doing. And if you're listening and you already somewhat believe, then what I'm hoping is guys like Josh are going to be able to make a case for where in the nuance of what a purpose-led approach creates when the day-to-day comings and goings of your work require you to do decision making that's based
Yep.
on a purpose-led approach. So, Josh, thanks so
Well,
much
thank
for
you.
coming on.
I
Oh,
appreciate it. Excited to chat.
yeah. So, before I jump into the specifics, I
Mhm.
hate boring my listeners with like a long introduction of my guest.
Sure.
So, but I do want to give you the opportunity yourself to kind of talk about Josh the man, ImageOne as a company, and kind of how that whole story relates to what we're going to talk about today.
Sure, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Roger. Really, really do appreciate it. Likewise, I don't want to bore anyone either, so I'll try to make it fairly quick. Yes, I've been here at ImageOne for a little over 4 years. I am in the president and CEO seat as of January, and I joined ImageOne originally as head of operations, a vice president of operations. So I kind of grew up in the operations world. Um, I married, have three school age kids, so we definitely they keep us busy. When I'm not here serving the team, I'm the family Uber, it seems these days, just from activity to activity or sport to sport. But it's a blessing and I love it. Wouldn't trade it for anything. My journey, just at a very kind of quick high level, as it relates to what we're talking about today, really evolved probably 10 or 12 years ago into really connecting to purpose as a leader. I actually didn't even have the language for it at the time, but what I came to learn was that the sort of leader I wanted to be was a servant leader. And once I got introduced to that construct, and I actually took some coursework at the Robert Greenleaf Center in Indianapolis. He's the kind of the founder of servant leadership. That really kind of lit my fire, right? To kind of what you described earlier and the energy that you were describing about, showing up selling plastic, if you will, right? So for
Right.
us, same sort of thing, showing up selling printers. Becomes a whole new thing when you're thinking about it in terms of purpose. So 10 or 12 years ago is really when I got aligned to that, and funnily enough, I began engaging organizations who played in that space, who were very purpose driven, looking to just by osmosis, if nothing else, talk to leaders, learn how they were leading, how they were building these organizations, how they were growing their companies. And through that, I met Rob Dubay, who's a co-owner of ImageOne. And that began an amazing relationship, a mentoring relationship between he and I that eventually culminated in an opportunity to come join ImageOne. And so that's what brought me here back about 4 years ago. And I've pinched myself, it's been a blessing ever since.
And you mentioned it briefly, but let's
Mhm.
give you the opportunity to explain what it is that ImageOne actually is from a company perspective and the value that you provide your clients.
Sure thing. Thanks for that. So, the what we do is we are really turnkey for mid to large size enterprises. Although we do have companies of every clients of every size, but primarily mid to large size enterprises. We are a turnkey provider of what's called managed print services. So, said another way, is you think of their IT environment as it relates to printers, scanners, copiers, all the software that wrap around those, the cybersecurity elements and components within that. All that is kind of turnkey. So companies hire us to basically manage that whole environment. We sell them product, we service, we provide supplies and parts. We essentially make sure everything's up and running every day. In addition, we have kind of next-gen solutions that we offer, such as workflow software and other sorts of solutions that help our clients get out of the business of print altogether, for workflows or processes, things of that nature. So that's really what we do in terms of function. However, our purpose here at ImageOne is to deliver the X, to everyone, every day, every time. That is our stated purpose, and it's on the walls, and you'll hear someone in this company say it every single day. And that's really kind of our why. We want to deliver this amazing customer experience.
Yep.
It just happens to be with printers, copiers, and in the management service space.
Yeah, and not unlike what Roger Burnett at Social Good
Mm-hmm.
Promotions sells when it comes to you, Mr. or Mrs. Listener, are considering what Josh just said, and you're like, well, printers, I mean, who even prints anything anymore?
That's right.
And just like selling plastic, it's the service we provide is really more a function of the trust that the people who use us provide as a result of what they've been able to witness either as a client of our organizations or by referral or some other
Yep.
method by which someone has said, oh, you have a problem, you should talk to Josh about that. Or the ImageOne team is really going to be able to help you because they've been able to do something similar for us. And I would agree that culture is what is the underpinning that allows us to be able to deliver the experience that the people who come into contact with our brands are able to experience as a result. So that's really what we want to dive into, right? So
Yep.
um, I'm just going to ask it straight out. Like, in your opinion, Josh, like, how does ImageOne's purpose-led approach reinforce the culture of the organization?
That's a great question. And I agree with you. I think the culture of the organization then sort of emanates out in terms of what your clients and customers experience. And it's
Correct.
what takes, for example, your business and my business out of the world of commoditization,
Yep.
right? And into the world of partnership and unique experience, right? And value in the eyes of a customer. But with respect to your question, purpose is really our glue for our culture, right? Or you can kind of think of it as our social contract in a way. I stated the purpose earlier, to deliver the X to everyone, every day, every time. And it's important also to understand that our core values are super important for us also, right? And our core values and our purpose really live hand in glove with each other. So they inform everything that we do. They're clearly stated, repeated often. The old adage. I oftentimes think of myself as chief repeating officer, and it's important, and so they really are hand in glove. I'll give you kind of maybe an example that sort of demonstrates the impact that our purpose has had on our culture and how we operate, especially during times of adversity. 2 years ago was a struggle for all of us, right? And not to say that I'm trying to sort of win points for who had it the worst by any stretch, but I will tell you, in our business, you may have already figured out that we make money by people being in the office printing documents, right? That's
Right.
a big part of our revenue stream. So when you shut down every office, it's not a slow like decrease of revenue. I mean, it from that fateful Thursday in March to the following Monday, that revenue stream practically dried up, right?
Yep.
And it was terrifying. And so we lean into our values and we lean into our purpose. We want to deliver the X to everyone, every day, every time. And that includes our team, right? That includes this culture. It's not just about making customers happy. It's about very much starting with serving the team. And so we concluded we're going to follow our core values, one of which is open and honest. We shared with them the full financial picture. We got together every week, every Friday for a year, for an hour. And I walked them through, here's how we're doing. Here's our cash. Here's our profit, or for many months our loss, right?
Right.
And so on and so forth. Here are the decisions we need to make. What do you think? Seeking input, seeking perspective, having our team, have a seat at the table, because at the end of the day, even if decisions are hard and painful, we want to, even as weird as it might say, DTX that experience for the team, right? And I've been hard pressed to come across too many organizations that took that top to bottom kind of collaborative approach during that time. And you can see it in how the team interacted, how they showed up for each other. Everybody stuck it out. We kept the full team together, and I credit our core values and our purpose with being that North Star, and guiding us through that incredibly challenging time. I know it's not over per se, right? But we're hopefully through the worst of those days.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty powerful for us.
gosh, I'm going to struggle to articulate this well, but when the members of the team feel like they had a say in the outcome, even if it's painful, more often than not, those team members will own the decision in a much more personal kind of way than if that decision is made independent of them and then bestowed upon them.
That's right.
And so, like, how did that manifest itself for ImageOne in that process? What were
Yeah,
some of the things that you saw occur?
sure. Great question. And I want to preface this by saying it is crucially important that it not be window dressing, right? Don't
Sure.
ask the team if you don't intend to take it seriously, right?
Right.
We're not trying to manage optics. It's a genuine engagement. Um, here's a good example. Probably what if you ask the team would probably be the first one that would come to their minds, and that was the issue of pay. Our
Mhm.
revenue had dropped so drastically, and we were under such kind of anxiety about how long this would go, that we really made two commitments right up front. We wanted to ensure our continued financial stability, being good financial standing, stable, right, as a company every single day, and do our very best to keep the team together. Those were our two guiding principles. And so we went to the team and I said, look, it looks like we're going to have to take some pay reductions as a team. And as we went through that process, we said, hey, I said, we have the choice of just micromanaging our every month, seeing how we're doing, and or every pay period, we can decide if we need to do a certain reduction. We had set some kind of thresholds and whatnot. So
Right.
there's a little bit, sausage making behind the scene that we don't have to go into here to help give the team some guidance of what might happen week to week or month to month. But we said, hey, would you rather us just make a decision and apply it for the whole next quarter, or would you rather run alongside with us and every 2 weeks be sort of part of that decision of do we need to introduce any pay reductions for this pay period or not? And the team elected the latter. And so that's what we did. So it's kind of one example, pay that you really strike into a lot of people's, when you hit in people's pocketbooks, there's a whole lot of emotion there, right? For
Sure.
sure. But we were very transparent about we don't know what the right thing to do is. And we understand that the impact is going to be different for everybody. So here's what we're thinking. What do you think? Here are our options. What do you think? What would you do? And we took that feedback and we acted on it. So that's just kind of one example where, yeah, if you ask the team, it felt like a little bit of a roller coaster, but they were kind of part of the decision to opt into that roller coaster because they knew that if we were doing better than expected, they would not have to have pay decreases along the way within a quarter, and it was more desirable, right, for them to take that route. And so that's what we did together.
And I think about it now as your team is back together, back in the office, back doing sort of what it looked like somewhat to a certain degree pre-pandemic, and what that must feel like for them to look at one another and say, hey, we were able to come through that together. I have to expect that has galvanized the team in a way that we probably can't even really articulate.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's sort of a know it when you see it sort of thing. I
Yeah.
think, but it was incredibly humbling. It was something Rob and Joel, his co-owner, and I would talk often about is just how humbling it was. And one of the lessons that I learned is that it's sort of like the things you do during the good times help. It's almost like you're making deposits into this kind of culture account that when things get hard, you people need to trust how you're going to make the decisions and how they're going to be engaged, and you build that trust by demonstrating a pattern of consistent behavior, right, as a
Yep.
company and as leaders, so that they know when times get tough, here's how I can expect to be engaged, how I can expect these folks to make decisions, my leadership to make decisions. And I think that was a super important lesson learned for us, because just how they showed up in support of each other. I had team members calling me saying, take half my pay. And I don't mean one or two. I had many team members saying, I don't need it. Take half my pay. I know we've got some folks for whom pay reductions would be really impactful. Put it towards them. And when we come out of this, we can figure out how to make it whole, but just put it towards them. We had a lot of that sort of stuff happening behind the scenes.
Giving me goosebumps,
Yeah,
man.
so it's pretty
That's where
amazing.
it's at.
Yeah.
That's where it's at. That's where it's at. All right. So we could belabor that.
Yep.
And, if we've not made our point here at the 15-minute mark when it comes to culture, then we'll just move on for the sake of time's sake.
Fair
But
enough. Fair enough.
So for the hardcore business people who are listening, let's pivot to productivity. Let's talk about how potentially, from your perspective, Josh, what have you witnessed when it comes to personal productivity and the connection that purpose has to that particular topic?
So here's we talk a lot about, productivity, especially growing up in operations, right? The
Right.
way that I did, it's like the holy grail. Productivity and efficiency are the two biggest buzzwords. To me, productivity is it's simply maximizing, I'll call it, the creation of value while simultaneously minimizing the friction involved in creating that value. So that's how I think about productivity. Um, Purpose and values, like I said, our core values and purpose really being, hand in glove. I think that alignment helps us in a couple of ways. First and foremost, I think it removes friction, right? So friction comes from things like misaligned interests. What you and I want in our working relationship or in a certain process we're doing together might be different. Confusion over priorities, lack of training, poor communication, etc. When you have, strong purpose and core values, it's sort of like everyone's playing by the same rules. They know how we need to show up for each other. They know how our processes need to perform, right? They know what's expected. So I think it helps remove friction. Doesn't eliminate it. There's lots of other causes of friction, but it certainly helps remove it versus a purposeless or not values aligned organization. Second thing I really feel deeply believe that it does is it helps with motivation, and motivation has a lot to do with productivity. The will to achieve the will, if you will, to achieve these results, to be productive. So I think if you consider those two elements, removing friction, right, plus inserting or injecting motivation, you sort of by necessity improve productivity, right? That's just going to happen. You don't even have to set improved productivity as the goal. That's just an outcome. That's a natural outcome of doing those behaviors. So, as an example for us, we with behind our purpose and our core values, we have always improving is one of our core values. And so we look at things like we measure flow as perception data, how the team feels about flow of their processes, their happiness. We have kind of a phrase, what bugs you, kind of what's on your bugs you list, So there's some anecdotal perspective data that tells us, we're improving things and improving that experience for them. And we also, of course, look at things like our SLAs, net promoter scores, things of that nature that kind of help tell us we're getting the results of productivity, of improved productivity, are kind of showing up through those mechanisms. The last point I'll make is we are very intentional about process improvements. We actually have a whole sort of work stream behind that, whether it's automations and things like that. And so we do measure savings in terms of hard and soft costs. So, Roger now setting up, editing and setting up his podcast, has saved 2 hours per podcast by injecting this process improvement. So we measure that sort of thing. So that's kind of a flavor, but really I think fundamentally it comes down to me to that purpose and core values alignment drives improvement in motivation and an improvement in friction, a reduction of friction.
And I bet if I were to wander the halls of ImageOne and sit and listen, regardless of department, what I witness frequently is the speed of decision making at the departmental level is so much faster when every member of the organization has a very strong handle how their decision making affects or is a reflection of the brand values of the organization. And when it's a plaque on a wall and it's not really talked about and not really a part of the lexicon of the company's culture,
Yep.
it creates gaps. And I've written about this extensively. Like when you create a gap for in your values, when it comes to a decision-making point for the members of your organization, what they're going to do is they're going to insert their values in place of yours.
Right.
When you've not given them a clear understanding of what the value is supposed to be. And most of the time it's okay. Not always.
Yep. Yep.
And what a reflection of dissonance for your client when that person inserts their brand value or their values in where yours are supposed to be. And it's evident as an example of the gap. It creates a problem for your client base, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah, it really does. And it's at best it's confusing. but all too often, it's frustrating, and it erodes trust, right,
Mhm.
in the eyes of the customer, the client, and so on. And I agree with you. I don't really believe that there's ever sort of just an absence of values in a decision or in a debate. But it's just a question of whether you're going to set the table for what those values are going to be, or if you're going to allow the parties involved to kind of make it up as they go along. My experience has been when, I think conflict is good. I think there's, we could talk forever about, good conflict, bad conflict, all that sort of thing. But when you have parties and principals involved in a decision, or involved in a debate, or involved in a disagreement, who have the same interests, which is driven by purpose and values, then you're evaluating options and decisions sort of the same way. You're seeing each other's perspectives rather than arguing and debating based on position, which is driven by one's own values, right? Um, and so what happens then, how that sort of, now coming back to your question about the sort of the customer or client experience. So now the way we make a decision about in the billing department that the customer interacts with is the same sort of experience as on the service side, which is the same sort of experience on the sales side. So there's continuity of, oh yeah, it's not just, they preach in, we get the DTX, deliver the X in the sales process, but not in the service and not in the billing and so on and so forth.
Yep.
They sort of get it throughout. And so we'll have lots of debates and frustrations and conflicts, just like any other business does, right? But we're making the decisions based on this foundation of purpose and values. And while never perfect, I think it helps us avoid a lot of the pain that would occur if we didn't have those assets, right? And you just alluded to one, which is the customer's point of view.
Yeah, society would benefit from this lesson at this
Yep.
moment. We won't.
Yes.
Sorry.
No worries.
All right. So again, let's get back to, we've
Mhm.
got business people who are paying attention to this
Mhm.
discussion. So, um, one of my favorite phrases that people often kind of look at me sideways because it means a lot of different things to different people is this notion of competitive differentiation, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
let's talk about, from a business development perspective, how does a purpose-led strategy give people utilizing it a leg up over their competition?
Yes, that's a great question, and it is a big part of our value proposition. And we have, as we've grown, we've seen it kind of pay off time and time again. And I'll jumping to the end first here. Our customer retention or attrition rate is virtually nil. Our attrition rate, and most of our business comes from referrals. We've never really had to have this major, massive marketing machine, right? And that's been true for our entire time. And so a lot of that is because of exactly what you just described. So, not only is it front and center in our stated value proposition, but we've also found that, like attracts like. And so when we have a customer who, or a client who values what we value and what we deliver, when they go someplace else, oftentimes they take us with them, you know? And so the other thing I would mention too is, I think, our discovery process, we call it the discovery here at ImageOne, is really geared towards sort of, among other things, identifying, do you care about what we're good at, right? We aren't the cheapest shop in town, nor do we want to be, right? We are the best value in town. Of that, I am certain. And if you value amazing customer experience, partnership, and all the other things that come with that, if all you value is procuring hardware at the lowest possible cost, that's not our purpose, right? And so if we try to satisfy that purpose, we aren't being ourselves. We
Right.
aren't being true to our identity. And then you've got the friction,
Yep.
right? Then you've got the heartburn. Then you're arguing and negotiating based on positions, and on and on and on we go. So yeah, we have had to, accept that along the way we have lost business where those companies maybe were no longer values aligned. They didn't
Right.
care about what we cared about. They weren't purpose and values aligned, and that's okay. They got exactly what they paid for, I'm sure. Um, and so, for us, it has really empowered our sales team and our business development efforts to sort of come from a position of authenticity, that this is really who we are. This is really what we do. This is not a sales tactic. This is how we treat each other and ourselves and our team. And and I think just the positive energy from that has really stoked the fire of our business development efforts and our sales team. We have a very tenured sales team. We've been fortunate to have very, very low turnover in our sales team for forever.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of that is because of how special what you just what we're talking about here is, and how powerful it is in the sales cycle.
Yeah. Most of the time, once a salesperson has experienced that, even if they don't fully understand what it is, they know how it feels.
Yep.
And when it's gone, the void is palpable. So no wonder you have tenure, because once you've gotten to that place where you've connected personally with how the machine is trying to run, I don't feel like I'm just an expendable part of what we do here. I feel like I'm integral to making the machine be as successful as it possibly can be. And consequently, on the customer side, it's kind of what we're talking about. My research shows time and time and time again, referrals, stark raving fans of clients bring people to your door because they want the person they're referring to feel what they feel.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
And it's like, I'm doing you a favor because
Hmm.
look at this cool thing that is kind of our secret. Don't tell anybody else, because look at this amazing company that we get to do business with on a day in and day out basis. So it just has this way of kind of continuing to build
It does,
on
yeah.
itself.
It's sort of self-fueling in a way, for sure. And the other point I would make is, talking to lots of other leaders over my tenure, and particularly, on the sales side, I hear so often about how frustrated sales teams can become or are when they feel like they're spending half their time dealing with angry customers or angry clients because the service side or the operations side or the finance side, et cetera, is under delivering,
Yeah.
right? And but conversely, for us, and what I'm so humbled and grateful for is this team, the way we show up for each other, is that's never a concern for our sales team, right? It's very few and far between. We're not perfect. I'll be the first to say we're not perfect. We make mistakes,
Sure.
but they're mistakes of the head, not the heart. And we learn from those lessons and we avoid those mistakes in the future. But I will tell you, you know, we don't have customers blowing up the phones of our sales team because they feel like they're getting
Right.
underserved,
Right.
right? Post sales cycle. And I have come to learn that that's a big deal for a high functioning sales team,
Yeah,
you
for
know.
sure. And it gives us the continued confidence as salespeople to go out and represent the brand
That's
to
right.
new prospects, because
Authentically. Yep.
they've never let me down personally with
That's
respect
right.
to my personal integrity when I'm going out and trying to convince the uninitiated to the value
Yep.
of what the organization is capable of. So,
Spot on. Yep.
so cool. So, in these discussions, typically with folks like yourself, Josh, what I hear often is stories of personal transformation
Hmm.
that are a result of this purpose journey. How does that apply to you?
Yeah, gosh, I could go on and on about that. It's been really amazing as my career has progressed, how commingled professional and personal sort of development, right, has become.
Right.
And I don't know if that's just, who knows, having kids, getting married, getting older, becoming a leader of others, et cetera, all probably, come together to create this awareness. But there is a ton of cross pollination between the two for me. I'll be honest with you. I'm a huge advocate for therapy,
Mhm.
and I've been active in therapy for over a decade, and it's been incredibly helpful for me personally, as well as and in my relationships, as well as professionally, and the type of leader and listener that I am, and vice versa, right? All the coaching and learning around servant leadership and purpose driven communication and dialogue and conflict and all the rest has been really helpful for me personally. The way I kind of think about it is, I view our the purpose I described to you earlier, right? To deliver that X experience to everyone, every day, every time, and our core values as sort of the best version of who I personally want to be.
Mhm.
Right. So it's aspirational, right? You're never going to be perfect, but it's something you strive for. I strive to live those every day, just in how I interact with my wife, with my kids, with my parents, with my community, with my friends. Some days I do better than others, right? But I found them to be especially powerful in my own personal in my own personal growth. And so I actually am really thankful in a lot of ways. I think unbeknownst to the 60 plus folks who I'm blessed to work with here at ImageOne, they've had a big impact on how I show up in my family and in my friends through how I've learned to really sort of lead with this purpose and our core values in the way that we've talked about over all these years. This team, as well as prior teams, when I sort of grew into servant leadership, have had a big impact for me on the personal side. I owe everybody a big thank you. And I continue to work every day to get better.
So I have this saying, and it's literally came from the truest place that I could ever tap into. And as a result, I love getting the opportunity to kind of like speak it into existence. And simply, if you surround yourself with inspirational people, you're bound to be inspired. It's
Yeah.
like osmosis. It really
Yeah.
is. And when you create a community of people who are inspirational and you surround yourself with them, the energy that that creates is impossible to ignore.
Yeah.
And I, like you, Josh, am a better husband. I'm a better person. Every part of my life has been improved since I opened my heart up to the idea of like, it's okay. You don't have to be cynical. If this is who you are, then this is who you should be.
Yep.
If you're not, then don't. It won't
Yep.
work. But
Yeah.
if you are, and you can be open and honest and forthright about the journey that you're on personally as a part of your professional relationships, it just has a way of weaving that trust
Yeah.
that you really need to build with someone that can do things like survive a pandemic
That's
and a
right.
global supply chain shortage. And people who left their jobs during this phase of what's going on in life didn't leave companies. They left the abandonment of the values that are written on the plaque on the wall.
Yep.
And the difference between those organizations like ours who live them every day and the people who just wrote them on the wall are the difference between butts and chairs and not.
Yep. Yep.
Fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. Yeah, I would totally agree. And even I would take it a step further to sort of say, the right butts and chairs,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and what we saw, and I'm sure you probably saw this too, is people who may have had a job
hmm
came back to the idea of employment and said, screw that, I'm working for where I want to work now.
Yeah. Well, and this is, and this is the beauty of it is, we're sitting here having this conversation, and I want to make sure that no one is under any misunderstanding that like we've got it all figured out or that I've got it all figured out. It's far from it, right? We're still learning every day and making mistakes all along the way. And so now, as a good example, we're now in a world where we have to rethink the levels of flexibility that we provide our team members for their work setting, work arrangements, the sorts of technology they need. But rather than think about that as a discrete set of kind of tactical decisions, we view it as what DTXs our team, right? So now we have a new environment that we never even conceived of. How do we DTX our team in that environment? How do we maintain this bond and culture and sense of connection in a much more diverse remote environment than we did before? So our purpose and core values don't change, right? The ways we evaluate tactics also doesn't change. It's against our purpose and our core values. Does it serve our purpose and core values? So it arms us by having the kind of that strength of foundation, right? That social contract, if you will, amongst a team. Any sort of unexpected circumstance that requires us to make decisions we never conceived of before, we can confidently do, knowing we've got this sound framework. We've got this sound North Star, if you will. And that helps me sleep better at night, knowing that the tiny fraction of the world that we control, which I would even argue maybe we don't even control any of it, we can rest easy knowing we'll handle it the right way.
The promotional marketing industry shrank by 50% during the pandemic in 1
Yep.
year. Social good promotions went 60 days without an order.
Wow.
So we were forced to go back and reevaluate our business model to make a decision about what the long-term viability of our company was. And it was a no-brainer for us because we knew what defined us from a values perspective. So we just focused on building our trustworthiness with our prospect base in the time that we knew no one
Yep.
was going to be buying these kinds of materials, so that perhaps we would raise our level of credibility and trust with those people in the time that they were probably have more time than ever before to reevaluate not only their vendor relationships, but really everything.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
by giving ourselves an opportunity to just focus on that trustworthiness, it took the pressure off of like, oh my God, we haven't gotten an order in a minute.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what does that mean for our business? It's like, well, no, we know who we are.
Yeah.
So we don't have to worry about that part of it. We could just focus on the pieces of what we were doing that were important in that moment. So
That's great.
you're hearing this for the first time out there. I'm going to give Josh the opportunity to give you one small piece of advice if you wanted to get the ball rolling yourself on something that could take you towards a more purpose-led strategy. What would be your piece of advice, Josh?
Yeah, yeah. I think we alluded to it a couple of times during this conversation, and the term osmosis, right, or surrounding yourself with people,
Yeah.
and that would be just be hungry to learn is the overall piece of advice. You know, and within that is a level of patience, right, and also an intentionality. Where are the people kind of quote unquote hanging out who believe in this, who lead this way, right? Who are those organizations? Who are those leaders? Where are those networks? Examples like Small Giants,
Mhm.
Tugboat Institute, University of Michigan Center for Positive Organizations. These are all groups that we're part of, and there are others out there too. Find those maybe locally or regionally or even nationally. Like, try to just get near those who have been or further down on this journey for themselves, not so that you can kind of pick which purpose and you want of but rather learn from them. And by learning from them, you'll be able to learn more from yourself through this journey. Right. I'll tell you what, if you're looking for a little motivation, right, to get started, I imagine this probably applies to some of the folks listening. Ask yourself how you feel Sunday night. Do you have that Sunday night dread about going to work on Monday? And tap into that. I mean, until I found purpose and really living into my purpose and being authentic about that at work, I felt that Sunday night dread.
I
So if you feel
think
that Sunday night dread, tap into it
you might
and
want to
use it.
rethink
Hmm.
things, right?
Yeah,
So I think you just gave me the title of my episode.
perfect.
Avoiding avoiding the Sunday night dread with Josh
That's right.
Britton from
That's right.
ImageOne.
There you
So
go.
thank you, man, Josh. I appreciate it. This is really
Oh,
great.
thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thanks for all you're doing. I love you. Be well.